My name is Adrian, and the night Brooke destroyed me, 300 people laughed before she finished the sentence. It happened on the roof of a hotel where every surface reflected someone richer, taller, cleaner, and more important than I looked. The party belonged to Marcus, the king of American luxury. His face was on the building, his gold emblem spun above the stage, and every guest acted as if breathing the same air as him was a personal achievement. I was there because Brooke had brought me. At least, that was what I believed. I had spent 2 weeks choosing a jacket that did not fit my shoulders, a pair of shoes that squeaked every time I moved, and a silver necklace I could barely afford. My hair hung over my forehead in greasy waves. My skin was angry. My teeth were uneven. I had the posture of a man apologizing for taking up space. But I was not stupid. That was the one thing nobody could take from me. I had graduated at the top of every class one entered. I could memorize a page after seeing it once. I could watch a room for 10 minutes and know who wanted attention, who wanted approval, and who was pretending not to want either. Yet intelligence was invisible, and people worshipped what they could see. Brooke knew that better than anyone. She had spent months telling me I was different from the shallow people around her. She said she liked my mind. She said I made her feel safe. I mistook those words for affection when they were really an excuse she used whenever someone asked why she was standing beside me. That night she called me onto the stage. I thought she had seen the necklace box in my pocket. I thought she wanted to make our relationship public. I even thought the giant screen behind us might show a picture of us together. Instead, it showed a photograph of me asleep at my desk, mouth open, hair flattened on one side, wearing a stained shirt. The crowd exploded. Brooke smiled like she had just performed a magic trick. She explained that for the past month, she had been making a series about dating below your standards. The final lesson, according to her, was that kindness did not mean you had to sacrifice your image. She said I was intelligent, dependable, and probably going to be successful someday, but standing beside me made her feel like she was losing value. Then she looked at the box in my hand. She did not let me open it. She told me to save the necklace for someone who could be grateful. That was when the room laughed again. I remember every face, not because I cared about them, but because data should never be wasted. Some people covered their mouths while recording. Some looked away because they felt guilty, but not guilty enough to stop watching. One man pointed at my shoes. A woman near the stage whispered something, and her friends bent forward as if my humiliation was a campfire keeping them warm. Marcus watched from a balcony above the crowd. He did not laugh. He simply glanced at me, decided I was not worth remembering, and turned away. That hurt more than the laughter. Brooke expected me to beg. I could see it in the way she leaned toward the cameras. She wanted tears. She wanted anger. She wanted a final ugly moment that would make her cruelty look justified. So I gave her nothing. I placed the necklace box on the stage, straightened the jacket that could not be straightened, and told her she had made one mistake. She asked what it was. I said she had assumed this was the best version of me. The crowd made that low, delighted sound people make when a wounded man tries to threaten a king. Brooke almost looked sorry for me. I walked away while the video of my sleeping face played above the city. Every step squeaked. By the time I reached the street, the clip already had thousands of views. Rain had started falling. I had $42 in my account, an unused necklace on a stage, and a face the internet had decided was funny. Most people would have gone home. I went to a barber shop. It was open past midnight, squeezed between a convenience store and a laundromat. The barber looked at my soaked hair and asked whether I had lost a bet. I told him to cut everything that made me look weak. He charged $30. When the last lock of hair hit the floor, the mirror showed a stranger who was still plain, still tired, and still badly dressed, but no longer looked like he was hiding behind himself. My jaw seemed sharper. My eyes looked less dull. It was not a miracle. It was a measurable improvement. A pale line of text appeared in front of me. Genuine personal improvement confirmed. $30 invested. Cashback multiplier. 100. $3,000 returned. I stared at the words until they vanished. Then my phone vibrated. My balance was $3,012. I did not scream. I did not ask the barber whether he had seen the message. I did not run into the rain shouting about destiny. I paid him a tip, walked to the convenience store, and began testing reality. A cheap pair of sunglasses changed nothing. No message. A bottle of water after hours without drinking improved my hydration. The system returned $200 on a $2 purchase. A glossy fashion magazine taught me nothing I could not find for free, no return. A basic skin cleanser reduced the oil on my face. $800 appeared after I spent $8. I bought a gold-colored chain for $20. It made me look worse. The system ignored it so completely that I felt judged. By sunrise, I understood the first law. The money did not reward spending, it rewarded progress. The second law took longer. The system measured the real effect, not my intention. If I bought something useful and failed to use it, nothing happened. If a treatment required several sessions, the return arrived only when improvement could be confirmed. If an expensive choice produced the same result as a cheaper one, the multiplier still used the amount I had truly invested, but only when the expense was reasonable for the improvement. I could not buy a $10,000 toothbrush and pretend my teeth had become royal. It was not a machine for greed. It was a machine for becoming. And I had just been given it on the exact night I decided the world would never laugh at me again. By 8 in the morning, I had a plan. I booked a dental appointment and paid $500 for the first stage of treatment. When the dentist corrected a painful bite issue and polished years of neglect from my teeth, $50,000 appeared. I paid $2,000 for a tailored wardrobe consultation, not designer logos, but clothing altered to my actual proportions. When I put on the first finished outfit, my posture changed before I even thought about it. $200,000 returned. I paid for medical skin treatment, nutrition testing, vision correction, and a trainer who specialized in rebuilding movement from the feet upward. Every expense came back 100 times larger after it produced a result. $30 became $3,000. $500 became $50,000. $2,000 became $200,000. And once I had $200,000, improvement stopped being a matter of products. It became an industry. I rented a private training floor for a month. I filled it with motion cameras, balance platforms, lights that revealed every flaw in my skin, and mirrors positioned at angles no normal person would ever want to see. I hired experts without asking for fame, followers, or comforting words. I wanted measurement. The first trainer told me my shoulders curved inward from years of trying to look smaller. I paid him $20,000 for an intensive correction program. When my stance improved, $2 million returned. A dermatologist designed a treatment plan that cost $40,000. $4 million came back. A dental team rebuilt my smile without making it look artificial. The work cost $100,000. $10 million appeared. I spent more in 3 weeks than Brooke's entire party had cost, and each time I became harder to recognize. But appearance was only the outer wall. I knew what people like Brooke really noticed. They noticed hesitation. They noticed a voice that rose at the end of a sentence, asking permission to exist. They noticed hands that did not know where to rest. They noticed eyes that escaped first. A perfect suit on a frightened man was still a costume. That was when I found Grace. Grace was an image strategist who had trained actors, executives, athletes, and heirs who had inherited money but not presence. Her fee for a private month was $25,000, and her waiting list was supposedly a year long. I sent her a video of Brooke rejecting me, then a video of me standing silently in the new suit. I wrote one sentence beneath them. Turn the distance between these two men into a weapon. She called 10 minutes later. When we met, she studied me for almost a full minute without greeting me. Most people filled silence because it made them nervous. I let it sit between us until it belonged to me. She smiled. That was the first test. Grace did not flatter. She told me my face had improved faster than my instincts. She said I looked expensive until I moved. Then I looked like someone borrowing expensive clothes. I asked how long it would take to fix. She said 6 months. I told her she had 6 weeks. Her program was brutal in ways the gym never could be. She taught me how to enter a room on the breath between 2 conversations. She made me hold eye contact with strangers until they looked away, then trained me to release it first so it felt like a gift instead of a challenge. She recorded my voice from every angle and removed the weak rhythm I had developed from speaking too quickly. I learned that confidence was not volume, it was timing. I learned that charisma was not kindness. It was making people feel that the version of themselves standing near me was more interesting than the version that had entered alone. I learned to touch a glass without fidgeting, to sit without collapsing, to walk as if the floor had been placed there for me personally. The system rewarded every true improvement. Voice work returned millions. Movement training returned millions. A week of live social drills returned more money than most companies earned in a year. Grace noticed the spending before she noticed the results. She asked why I never hesitated over price. I told her price was only compressed time. That answer made her stop smiling. She began watching me the way I watched everyone else. Good. Trust was useful, but caution was more honest. I did not spend every dollar on myself. Once the cashback arrived, it was mine. I could use it for anything. The system simply refused to multiply empty luxury. I tested that limit with a $90,000 watch. It was beautiful. It was rare. The salesman wore gloves while holding it. I put it on and felt exactly the same. No message appeared. I laughed so suddenly that the salesman took a step back. The system had better taste than the people at Brooke's party. I returned the watch and spent the same amount renting a small theater. Then I hired 50 performers to become the cruelest audience money could buy. They interrupted me, mocked my clothes, shouted questions, pretended to fall asleep, laughed at the wrong moments, and replayed Brooke's video on a screen behind me while I delivered speeches under hot lights. For 3 days I failed. My jaw tightened, my hands became stiff. My voice lost depth whenever I saw the old image of myself. On the 4th day, I stopped trying to ignore the humiliation. I used it. I turned toward the giant screen, looked at the version of me everyone had mocked, and spoke as if I were introducing an enemy I had already defeated. The performers went silent without being asked. The system confirmed measurable improvement in emotional control, stage presence, and recovery under social pressure. $9 million became $900 million. That was the moment Grace realized I was not merely rich. I watched her look at the theater, the performers, the equipment, and then at me. She had seen clients waste fortunes trying to feel important. I had burned $9 million to eliminate one visible weakness, and I looked happier than a man receiving a crown. She asked what I planned to do when there was nothing left to improve. I told her perfection was a horizon. It moved when I moved. That answer frightened her. It also made her stay. By the end of the first month, my reflection had changed enough that facial recognition on my phone failed twice. My jawline was clear. My skin looked calm under direct light. My hair fell into place with almost no effort. My body was not enormous, but it moved with trained precision. Every suit was cut to create one clean line from shoulder to heel. More important, I had stopped reacting before I chose the reaction. That was the real transformation. People think power means getting what you want. Power is deciding what everyone else thinks you want. I disappeared from social media while the rejection clip kept spreading. Brooke posted updates about choosing herself. She gained followers. She appeared on podcasts. She laughed about the necklace. Every week, someone edited my old face into a new joke. I never responded. Silence made them careless. Brooke assumed I was hiding. Marcus forgot I existed. The audience believed the story had ended. Meanwhile, I studied them. I tracked which frames of the video were shared most often. I measured the exact words people used when describing me. Awkward, greasy, weak, desperate, invisible. I built my training around destroying those words one by one. For awkwardness, I paid for dance, fencing, and runway movement. For greasy, I mastered grooming and skin science until I could explain every product better than the people selling it. For weak, I trained strength, balance, and combat under pressure. For desperate, I practiced walking away from beautiful things, expensive things, and flattering people without looking back. For invisible, I began designing an entrance the world would replay longer than it had replayed my humiliation. The system loved specificity. A general language course produced a modest improvement. A private immersion program built around negotiation, humor, and public speaking changed my ability in measurable ways and returned 100 times its cost. A normal gym membership helped. A customized movement laboratory that corrected the angle of my stride helped much more. A luxury hotel suite earned nothing. A sleep clinic inside that hotel, where specialists rebuilt my schedule and eliminated the exhaustion under my eyes, returned $40 million. A sports car earned nothing. Professional driving lessons improved my reactions, spatial judgment, and calm at speed. The return bought a fleet. I did not buy the fleet. I bought a wind tunnel. Grace thought I was joking when I told her I wanted to learn how to walk through hurricane-force wind without losing the line of a coat. I was not joking. Oraline existed only as a word in my private notes then, but I already knew what it would become. Luxury had spent a century teaching people to stand still and look expensive. I would build clothing for people who moved like storms. The wind tunnel cost $4 million to rent and modify for a month. Engineers built a runway through the center. At first, I could not take 3 steps without twisting sideways. Fabric snapped against my body. My eyes watered. My perfect hair became a joke. So I trained. I learned to lower my center of gravity without appearing to crouch. I learned how a coat could catch air like a sail, and how one hand at the right angle could turn chaos into a pose. I walked through rain, dust, artificial snow, and winds strong enough to throw furniture. When I completed the runway at full speed without breaking posture, the system confirmed improvement in balance, movement, and performance control. $400 million returned. Grace stood behind the glass with both hands over her face. I could not tell whether she was amazed or questioning every decision that had led her to me. Probably both. I stepped out of the tunnel, hair ruined, coat torn, and smiled. Because I finally knew how I would return. Marcus was holding another rooftop event in 5 months. Brooke would be there. So would the same cameras. And this time, the wind would be mine. The next 4 months were not a makeover. They were an arms race against the person I had been yesterday. Every morning began with measurement, skin condition, body composition, vocal range, resting posture, reaction speed, reading speed, memory accuracy, emotional response under insult, even the time it took me to recover after making a mistake. Most people improve by accident and notice later. I improved on purpose and demanded evidence. The system did not care whether a change looked impressive. It cared whether it was real. That forced me to become honest in a way ordinary vanity never could. A camera-ready smile mattered, but so did fixing the jaw pain behind it. A deeper voice mattered, but only if I learned breath control instead of forcing a fake tone. A tailored coat mattered, but the system gave more value to the posture that made the coat unnecessary. That honesty made me dangerous. I could not lie to the system, so I stopped lying to myself. My greatest weakness was not my face, it was resentment. Whenever Brooke's name appeared on a screen, my pulse changed. Whenever someone laughed in the same rhythm as the rooftop crowd, my shoulders tightened by less than an inch. Grace noticed, because Grace noticed everything. She began slipping Brooke's image into training sessions without warning. A photograph would appear during a speech. The rejection clip would play in the middle of a dance routine. Once, she hired an actress to repeat Brooke's exact words while I balanced on a narrow platform above a swimming pool. I fell in. Grace did not apologize. She told me a man ruled by revenge could be led anywhere by the person he hated. I knew she was right, which made me dislike her for almost 6 seconds. Then I doubled her fee. The system returned the money only after I could watch the entire rejection without a measurable stress response. That took 12 days. On the 13th, I watched it twice while eating breakfast. I no longer saw a wound. I saw promotional footage. That was when Arline stopped being a private idea. I had studied clothing as a customer. But customers only understand the surface. I needed to understand cut, fabric, weight, motion, temperature, and the psychology of silhouette. So I paid a team of master tailors to teach me at a pace they called unreasonable. I slept 4 hours a night and carefully controlled cycles. I spent the rest measuring shoulders, cutting cloth, destroying prototypes, and walking in everything I made. The first coat looked magnificent while I stood still and ridiculous when I lifted my arms. The second moved well but made me look narrow. The third survived the wind tunnel but sounded like a collapsing tent. I burned it. Not because it was useless, but because keeping weak work nearby teaches the mind to tolerate it. Grace watched the flames and asked whether I planned to become a designer, model, or cult leader. I told her those were the same job if done correctly. She laughed despite herself. That mattered. Grace did not laugh to make people comfortable. Earning a real reaction from her was harder than winning applause from a room. I paid for lessons in textile engineering, color theory, stage lighting, photography, and visual storytelling. The system returned hundreds of millions as the skills became mine. Then I did something no luxury founder would admit to doing. I studied cheap clothes. I bought hundreds of ordinary jackets, shirts, jeans, shoes, and coats. I wore each one under motion cameras. I found where fabric pulled, where collars collapsed, where pockets ruined posture, and where people accepted discomfort because they assumed looking good required suffering. Orline would not decorate the body. It would train it. I designed seams that guided the shoulders back without feeling restrictive. I shifted weight inside coats so the wearer naturally stood taller. I changed pocket placement to stop nervous hands from folding inward. I used subtle texture at the fingertips to reduce fidgeting during conversation. The clothing created measurable improvement in presentation. The first time I wore a complete prototype for a full day, the system returned 100 times the cost of its development. That single return gave me more money than Marcus had spent launching his latest collection. I could have opened 100 stores. I opened none. Scarcity is not created by making less. It is created by making people feel they arrive too late. I began appearing in public for exactly 7 minutes at a time. The first appearance was at a museum fundraiser where nobody expected me. I wore a black Oraline coat with no visible emblem. I entered after the main attraction had ended, and the room's attention was searching for somewhere new to land. Grace walked beside me, not as decoration, but as proof that I belonged. She wore a silver prototype that changed shape when she moved. We crossed the room, spoke to no cameras, and left before anyone learned my name. Photographs appeared online within an hour. People asked who made the clothes. I did not answer. The second appearance happened at a boxing event. I wore white in a room full of dark suits. When a drink flew from the crowd, I turned without looking, caught the glass by the rim, placed it on a tray, and continued walking. That was not luck. I had paid for reaction training with professional fighters and stunt performers. The system returned $90 million when my response time improved. The clip received 20 million views. The third appearance happened outside a theater during a thunderstorm. I stepped from an ordinary car wearing the coat built for the wind tunnel. The rain hit sideways. Umbrellas folded. Reporters ran for cover. I walked through the center of the storm as if the weather had been hired to reveal the shape of my clothes. A photographer shouted for me to stop. I did not. The image of the coat floating behind me became the most shared fashion photograph of the month. Still, I did not reveal the brand. People began inventing identities for me: a hidden prince, a European model, an actor filming a secret project, a billionaire's son, a professional thief. The thief theory was my favorite. Brooke shared one of the photographs with a single question mark. She did not recognize me. That was useful information. I had expected emotional satisfaction. Instead, I felt the clean pleasure of a prediction being confirmed. Her mind had never stored my face carefully. She had stored a category: awkward, forgettable, beneath her. Once the category vanished, so did I. That meant the reveal would strike harder. But 5 months is a long time when attention moves at the speed of a thumb. I needed to become more than a mystery. I needed to become a standard people use to judge everyone else. So I trained the skill most beautiful men neglect: listening. Grace built social exercises where I could not speak for the first 10 minutes. I had to guide conversations using only questions, expression, and timing. I learned how quickly people revealed themselves when they believed they were being understood. A wealthy guest complained about being surrounded by flatterers, then became loyal to anyone who challenged him gently. A famous performer said she hated attention, then kept checking whether people were watching. A powerful executive spoke constantly about honesty and lied in every third sentence. I did not judge them. Judgment wastes information. I sorted needs the way a musician sorts notes. Approval, safety, excitement, permission, envy, relief. Once I knew which feeling a person lacked, I could make my presence seem like its source. The system confirmed improvement in empathy, persuasion, and social awareness. The word empathy amused me. Feeling what others felt was optional. Knowing what they felt was power. Grace accused me of turning human connection into mathematics. I told her music was mathematics too, and people still cried when they heard it. She had no answer. By the 5th month, Oraline had a private workshop, a small army of unnamed specialists, and enough finished pieces for one impossible launch. I chose 12 looks, no more. Each represented a stage of control. The first was built for stillness, the second was built for speed. The third used reflective thread that appeared dark until light struck from the side. The fourth could survive heavy rain without losing shape. The fifth changed its silhouette when the wearer raised both arms. The final look was mine. It was not the most expensive. It had no jewels, no giant logo, no fabric that required a dramatic story about a remote mountain. It simply made every line of my body appear inevitable. When Grace saw it, she went quiet. She walked around me twice, adjusted nothing, and said I finally looked like the man I had been pretending to be. I corrected her. I had never been pretending. I had been rehearsing. The rooftop event approached. Marcus announced it as the unveiling of his newest campaign, a celebration of timeless perfection. Brooke appeared in the promotional image wearing a gold dress and the expression of someone who believed history had invited her personally. She had become one of Marcus's rising faces after the rejection clip made her famous. She attended interviews, gave advice about standards, and told audiences that women should never apologize for wanting more. I agreed with her completely. Wanting more had changed my life. Grace secured invitations without using my old name. Marcus's people believed I was an international model representing a private investor. They had been trying to identify me for weeks, so when I accepted, they gave me access to the center of the event. It was almost disappointing. The night before the party, I performed one final test. I placed the old jacket, the squeaking shoes, and a photograph of my former face on 3 stands inside the training room. Then I wore the final R-line suit and stood in the middle. Grace asked what I saw. I saw evidence. The jacket proved I had once confused effort with taste. The shoes proved I had once accepted discomfort because I feared returning them. The photograph proved that nature had given me raw material, not a verdict. I felt no hatred. That worried me. Hatred had powered the first month. Without it, I needed a larger reason. Then I remembered Marcus looking away. The laughter had been temporary. Indifference was the real enemy. I did not want Brooke back. I did not want an apology. I wanted to control the value of attention itself. I wanted to decide who the world looked at, what it desired, and what it feared becoming. Our line would be more than clothing. It would be proof that identity could be engineered, and I would be the first product. The morning of the event, I spent $12 million on something Grace called insane even by my standards. I rented the airspace above the hotel for 12 minutes, hired a formation of silent electric aircraft, built a temporary runway from the neighboring tower, and installed wind machines along the rooftop garden. None of that earned cash back. The spectacle was not self-improvement. So I spent another $2 million on aerial balance training, high-altitude movement, emergency descent practice, and live performance coaching under extreme noise. That did earn cash back. $200 million returned before lunch. The difference mattered. The system would fund the skill. I would fund the myth. Grace looked over the final plan and asked whether walking through the front door had offended me personally. I told her front doors were for arrivals that needed introduction. At 9 that night, Brooke stood on the same stage where she had rejected me. The old video played briefly as part of her speech about refusing to settle. My former face appeared above the crowd again. People laughed on cue. I watched from the neighboring tower. My pulse did not change. That was worth more than the money. Marcus stepped onto the balcony and raised a glass. Spotlights turned toward him. The roof became silent. Then every light went out. Not by sabotage, by design. Marcus had approved a surprise sky presentation from the mysterious investor he hoped to impress. He had no idea the presentation was me. A thin white runway extended across the gap between the towers. Wind rose from hidden machines. The electric aircraft formed a moving corridor of light above the city. I stepped onto the bridge. From a distance, the R-Line suit looked black. As I walked, the aircraft lights struck the reflective thread, and silver lines ignited across the fabric one after another, like a city turning on beneath my skin. The wind climbed. Coats and dresses whipped around the rooftop. Guests grabbed tables. One decorative banner tore loose and vanished into the night. I kept walking. Every step had been trained. Every angle had been measured. The coat opened behind me exactly when I reached the center, catching the air like a pair of dark wings. Phones rose across the roof. Nobody laughed. When I reached the other side, Marcus moved forward first. Of course he did. Powerful men fear mysteries that attract more attention than they do. He welcomed me with the smile of a man deciding how much I might be worth. Brooke stood beside him. She looked directly into my face and saw a stranger. 6 months earlier, she had told the world that standing beside me lowered her value. Now she adjusted her posture because she was standing beside me. She asked whether we had met. I let the silence last just long enough for every nearby camera to lean closer. Then I repeated the final words I had said on the night she rejected me. You assumed that was the best version of me. Her expression changed in stages. Confusion, recognition, disbelief. Then fear, because she understood the cameras were still recording. The rooftop became so quiet that I could hear the wind passing through the lights. Brooke looked at my eyes, then my jaw, then the line of my shoulders. She whispered my name as if saying it too loudly might make the truth permanent. I smiled, not cruelly, Cruelty would have made us equal. Marcus looked from her to me and realized the forgettable man from the old video had just stolen his event without raising his voice. He asked whether the entrance was meant to embarrass his guest. I told him no, it was meant to introduce my brand. At that exact moment, every aircraft above us shifted formation. The lights spelled Arlene across the sky. The 12 prototype looks appeared on the giant screen, one after another. A countdown began beneath them. The private online release opened. 3 minutes later, every piece was sold. The guests had not even finished turning their phones toward the screen. Brooke stared at me as if I had climbed out of a grave wearing better tailoring. Marcus stared at the sales total. I watched both and felt almost nothing. Revenge is disappointing when you outgrow the person who caused it. Brooke tried to recover. She laughed softly and said she had always known I would become successful. I asked whether that was before or after she used my sleeping face as a joke. The cameras caught every detail of her silence. Then I gave her the exit she did not deserve. I thanked her. I said public humiliation had been the most useful feedback I had ever received. That changed the entire scene. If I attacked her, she could become a victim. If I forgave her, she could claim a place in my transformation. But gratitude placed her below me. It reduced her cruelty to unpaid motivation. The crowd laughed again. This time they were not laughing at me. Brooke's smile held for 4 seconds before it broke. Marcus understood what I had done. His expression did not change, but his hand tightened around the glass. He invited me to speak privately. I declined. That refusal mattered more than any insult. Everyone wanted Marcus's attention. I treated it as something that could wait. Grace joined me near the edge of the roof. The silver fabric of her dress shifted under the lights. She looked at the crowd, the cameras, the sales count, and Brooke's frozen expression. She said I had planned every second. I told her I had planned 37 possible versions. This one ranked 4th. She asked what the first ranked version looked like. I looked toward Marcus. It ended with him offering me his throne. Grace said that would never happen. I smiled because impossible predictions are merely invitations to begin. By midnight, the reveal had replaced the rejection clip everywhere. People placed the 2 videos side by side. My old face and my new face stared at each other across 6 months. Commentators analyzed my walk. Stylists argued about the suit. Trainers claimed they knew my secret. Surgeons insisted no natural transformation could happen so quickly. Motivational speakers turned me into a lesson before breakfast. Brooke lost followers, gained followers, then lost more when she posted a message suggesting she had inspired me intentionally. I did not respond. Arline's waiting list passed 1 million names. Marcus sent flowers the next morning. Inside the box was an invitation to his private showroom and a note with only 5 words. Every miracle needs a house. He wanted to buy Arline. He assumed I had built a door and needed his palace behind it. I sent the flowers back arranged into the shape of a crown with one missing point. No note. He would understand. Grace called the gesture theatrical. I called it efficient. But while Marcus prepared to turn me into a rival, someone else had watched the rooftop footage for a different reason. His name was Ethan. Ethan was famous for dismantling public myths. He had exposed fake prodigies, manufactured romances, miracle companies, and influencers whose perfect lives collapsed the moment he asked them the correct question. He did not care about fashion. He cared about patterns that should not exist. My pattern was impossible. A man with $42 had spent millions within weeks. A face had changed, a voice had changed, a body had changed, and then a luxury brand had appeared with enough money to challenge Marcus. The public saw transformation. Ethan saw an equation missing its center. 3 days after the rooftop launch, I received a package with no luxury branding and no attempt at mystery. Inside was a $30 gift card to the same barber shop where everything had begun. Beneath it was a photograph of me leaving that shop in the rain. On the back, Ethan had written one sentence. What did the first haircut buy you? For the first time in 6 months, someone had asked the right question. I did not destroy Ethan's note. I framed it. A threat should be studied where you can see it. Grace wanted to know whether the photograph frightened me. I told her fear was only useful when translated into preparation. The truth was more interesting. Ethan had located the first purchase. He did not know about the system. He could not. But he understood that my rise had not begun with a secret inheritance, a hidden investor, or a lucky deal. It had begun with a small physical change. That meant he had examined my timeline more carefully than anyone else. Marcus wanted to own my success. Brooke wanted to rewrite it. Ethan wanted to understand it. Understanding was the most dangerous desire of the three. I accepted his invitation before he sent one. I posted a photograph of the gift card beside the framed note. The caption said that anyone curious about the first haircut could ask me live. Within an hour, every major platform was demanding a conversation between us. Ethan had tried to choose the battlefield privately. I moved it into public before he could prepare the lighting. He responded with a time and place. No smile, no promotion. Just coordinates for a glass studio suspended above a television complex. Grace studied the set when we arrived. Every wall was transparent. Cameras moved on rails. The audience sat in a circle around two chairs, leaving nowhere to hide a reaction. Ethan had designed the room to feel like an interrogation while still looking elegant enough for entertainment. He entered wearing a wrinkled jacket over a flawless shirt. One shoe was polished and the other was not. It was deliberate. People who built perfect public images often became distracted by asymmetry. Ethan wanted to see whether my eyes moved toward the flaw. They did not. He noticed that I had noticed. That was our introduction. Ethan sat sideways in his chair and rotated a silver coin across his knuckles. He never looked at the cameras. That made the cameras love him. He began with easy questions. My childhood, my education, the rooftop, our line. He let the audience relax while he measured the speed of my answers. I gave him truth in carefully selected amounts. Yes, I had been humiliated. Yes, I had changed everything I could measure. No, I did not believe appearance determined human worth. It merely determined how quickly most humans bothered to discover that worth. The audience applauded. Ethan did not. Then he placed the $30 gift card between us. He asked what the haircut had bought me. I said it bought proof that small changes compound. He asked where the first $3,000 came from. I smiled. That number was not public. The studio became still. Ethan watched the smallest muscles around my eyes. He wanted surprise. I gave him interest. He explained his theory. On the night of my rejection, I had almost no money. After a $30 haircut, I spent roughly $3,000 within 48 hours. Then I spent tens of thousands after dental work, hundreds of thousands after wardrobe changes, and millions after larger training programs. He had traced the rhythm, not the source. Each visible improvement was followed by an increase in my spending power. The public had assumed the money created the transformation. Ethan suspected the transformation created the money. Grace sat beyond the cameras, perfectly still. I could feel Brooke and Marcus watching from somewhere outside the studio. The entire world seemed to lean closer. Ethan asked whether becoming better made me richer. I could have denied it. A simple denial would have sounded like fear. So I gave him a larger truth to hide the impossible one. I said yes. Every time I improved my appearance, skill, health, or communication, more opportunities appeared. People paid attention. Attention became demand. Demand became wealth. That was how every public figure worked. I had simply made the process visible. The audience nodded because the explanation was true. It was also incomplete. Ethan's coin stopped moving. He knew I had placed a believable bridge over a bottomless hole. Then he revealed the second part of his trap. A black curtain opened behind him. On a pedestal sat a diamond mask valued at $10 million. It was hideous, heavy, and famous for no reason except price. A charity auction had offered it for the night. Ethan said Arlen acclaimed luxury should improve the person wearing it. The mask improved nothing. It blocked expression, distorted speech, and weighed enough to damage the neck. Then he asked whether I would buy it. If I refused, he could say my wealth was an illusion, or my philosophy collapsed when tested. If I bought it and the system returned nothing, he might watch for a break in my confidence. He did not know the exact mechanism, but he had created a useless expense in front of millions of witnesses. It was clever. I bought the mask. The audience gasped when the sale confirmed. No system message appeared. $10 million vanished. Ethan watched me breathe. I lifted the mask, placed it over my face, and let the cameras capture how absurd it looked. Then I removed it and handed it to Grace. I said the object had just demonstrated Orlean's entire reason for existing. Price without improvement was only decoration pretending to be power. The audience applauded. Ethan asked why I had paid $10 million for a lesson I could explain for free. I told him nobody remembers free lessons. That line traveled around the world before the interview ended, but I was not finished. I announced that the mask would be broken into 100 pieces. Each diamond would be set inside a plain steel mirror and given to a student who could show a measurable transformation in any skill. No logos, no resale spectacle. Just a reminder that value meant nothing until it changed the person holding it. The charity audience exploded. I had lost 10 million and gained a global philosophy. Ethan's trap became my campaign. He smiled for the first time, not because he had lost, because I had confirmed something. I was willing to spend without reward when the public effect was valuable enough. That meant he could not expose me by tracking every purchase. He would need to isolate the purchases I treated differently. He ended the interview with one final question. He asked what happened when I reached perfection. I told him I would raise the standard. After the cameras stopped, Ethan remained in his chair. He said my pulse had changed only once during the interview. Not when he mentioned the first $3,000, not when I lost 10 million. It changed when he used the word perfection. I asked why that mattered. He said a man chasing beauty wants admiration. A man chasing perfection wants control. Then he walked away before I could answer. Grace joined me beneath the empty lights. She said Ethan was the first person who had looked at me and ignored the face. I told her that was why he would be difficult. She corrected me. That was why he might be right. I looked through the glass wall at the city below. Millions of windows. Millions of people improving slowly, accidentally or not at all. Ethan thought my need for control was a weakness. Perhaps it was. Weaknesses are only dangerous when they remain untrained. The next morning, I spent $60 million building a controlled failure program. It was the most ridiculous self-improvement facility ever created. One room contained a dinner table mounted on a platform that tilted without warning, while actors asked invasive questions. Another room simulated a runway where the floor changed speed beneath each step. A third filled with smoke, music, flashing lights, and people shouting contradictory instructions. There was a speech chamber that replaced every audience member with a screen showing my worst facial expression from the previous sentence. There was even a corridor where robotic arms threw harmless cakes at me while I practiced maintaining dignity. Grace called that room unnecessary. Then a cake hit her. She approved it after that. For 2 weeks I trained failure recovery, not avoiding mistakes. Recovering so smoothly that the mistake seemed planned. I spilled drinks and turned a movement into a toast. I forgot lines and used silence as emphasis. I ripped a sleeve and transformed the tear into a new silhouette. I fell from the moving runway, rolled, rose, and finished the walk without changing expression. The system confirmed massive improvement in improvisation, emotional control, physical recovery, and live performance. $6 billion returned. That was the true answer to Ethan's challenge. He had discovered that control mattered to me. So I trained the ability to look in control when control disappeared. Marcus chose that moment to invite me into his private showroom again. This time, I accepted. His building was a monument to expensive silence. The walls were pale stone. The clothes were spaced so far apart that each jacket had more room than my first apartment. Employees moved like they had signed an agreement never to disturb the air. Marcus waited alone beneath a chandelier made from hundreds of suspended gold needles. Up close, he was more impressive than the cameras showed. He was older, but every movement was practiced. His suit was perfect in the old way, rigid, formal, designed to remind everyone that he had arrived before them. He did not mention the crown of returned flowers. He praised Arline's launch, then explained that viral attention died quickly. Factories, stores, magazines, celebrities, and global events still answered to houses like his. He offered me a place beneath his emblem, unlimited production, and enough money to make a normal founder lose the ability to speak. I let him finish. Then I asked why the most powerful man in luxury had invited a temporary trend into a private room. Marcus's smile thinned. He said he respected talent. I said he respected threats earlier. The air changed. Marcus walked toward a wall displaying his first famous coat. He told me he had built his empire before I understood how to button a shirt. He had survived changing tastes, collapsing markets, scandals, copycats, and heirs who believed a surname was a skill. He said men like me arrived every few years with sharp faces and sharper confidence. Then they learned that attention was rented. I asked who owned the building where Brooke had rejected me. He said he did. I asked who owned the screens that replayed my face. He said he did. I asked whose emblem had been visible above the laughter. His eyes hardened. I told him he had already invested in my rise. He had provided the stage. Now I was offering him the rare chance to watch what his investment became. Marcus called me arrogant. I agreed. False humility would have insulted us both. He asked what I wanted. I walked to his first famous coat and examined the shoulders. The design was iconic, but the weight pulled the wearer backward. It looked commanding in photographs and felt exhausting after 20 minutes. I told him Oraline would open a temporary showroom directly across from his flagship during Crown Week, the largest luxury event he controlled. We would invite people to wear both brands while walking, sitting, climbing stairs, and speaking under pressure. No celebrity worship, no history lesson. Just measurable effect. Marcus said I would not receive a venue. I told him I had not asked for one. He said the press would ignore me. I reminded him that the press had followed me through a thunderstorm. He said suppliers would choose him. I said fabric did not understand loyalty. For the first time, Marcus lost his smile completely. He told me Crown Week would bury Oraline. I thanked him for giving the launch a headline. When I left, Grace was waiting in the car. She asked how badly it had gone. I told her perfectly. Marcus had wanted to absorb me. Now he wanted to destroy me. Destruction required attention, and attention was the one resource I needed him to spend. Within hours, rumors spread that Marcus had rejected Oraline as a temporary costume for insecure men. He believed the insult would weaken us. I printed it across the wall of our workshop. Every design team received the same instruction. Build something secure men would be afraid to test. The result was the Oraline trial. It was not a fashion show. It was a public transformation arena. Visitors entered wearing their own clothes. Cameras measured posture, stride, vocal projection, and movement. Then they wore an Oraline piece designed for their body and repeated the test. The changes were visible in minutes. Shoulders opened, steps lengthened, hands stopped hiding, voices carried farther. The system did not reward me for improving other people. It only multiplied investments in myself. That rule remained strict, but Oraline did not need the system to sell once the clothing proved its effect. I had used the power to learn. Now the skill created value on its own. That distinction was important. Ethan understood it before anyone else. He published a short analysis saying my real advantage was not money. It was that every dollar I spent seemed to make me more capable of producing the next dollar without help. He was close enough to make me uncomfortable. So I invited him to test the trial publicly. He accepted, but he arrived with a new trap. Ethan wore a deliberately terrible outfit, oversized pants, a shirt with one sleeve longer than the other, and shoes that forced his feet inward. Any Oraline garment would create a dramatic improvement simply because the starting point was absurd. If I celebrated the result, he could accuse the test of being manipulated. I refused to dress him. Instead, I stood him before the cameras and explained exactly what he had done. I pointed out the altered sleeve, the weighted shoe, and the false imbalance in the waistband. Then I told the audience Ethan had just proven our measurement system worked because it detected intentional distortion before recommending a product. The crowd laughed. Ethan did not mind. He had wanted to know whether I understood garment construction deeply enough to see the trap instantly. I had confirmed that too. He changed into normal clothes and completed the trial honestly. His posture improved by 12% in a fitted jacket. His stride became more even. His breathing deepened. He looked into the camera and admitted the effect was real. That single sentence sold more Oraline pieces than a month of advertising. Then he turned to me and announced his next challenge. For 7 days I would appear live without mirrors, stylists, edited footage, prepared clothing, or the ability to spend money during the broadcast. I would dress, train, speak, eat, and attend public events under constant cameras. He called it the No Mirror Week. The public loved the idea instantly. Marcus promoted it because he expected me to crack. Brooke posted that nobody could maintain perfection without a team hiding the truth. Grace asked whether I planned to refuse. I accepted before she finished the sentence. Ethan thought he was removing the system from the battlefield. He was. That was why I intended to win. Money had purchased training, but it could not walk for me. Treatments had improved my skin, but they could not choose my expression. Clothing had corrected my posture, but it could not create discipline. For 6 months, everyone had argued about whether my transformation was real. I was about to spend 7 days proving that the most expensive thing I owned was no longer an object. It was me. No mirror week began at midnight inside a house Ethan had chosen. The place had reflective surfaces removed from every room. Windows were coated. Screens displayed only text. Even the backs of spoons had been scratched dull. Cameras covered every angle, and millions of viewers could switch between them whenever they wanted. I arrived with one small bag. Ethan searched it in front of the audience. 3 plain shirts, 2 pairs of pants, training clothes, basic grooming supplies, no hidden tailor, no earpiece, no prepared speeches, no Auraline prototypes. Grace was allowed to watch from a separate control room but could not speak to me. Ethan took my phone and placed it inside a transparent box. A counter above it showed 7 days. Then he gave me the first surprise. He had replaced my bag. The clothes inside were not mine. They had been selected from discount bins in random sizes. 1 shirt pulled across my shoulders. 1 pair of pants was too wide. The only jacket had sleeves that covered half my hands. The cameras moved closer. Ethan expected discomfort. I felt relief. Clothing had been my first visible weakness, and I had spent months studying exactly how it failed. Without a mirror, I used touch. I found the shoulder seam, rolled the sleeve inward, adjusted the cuff with 2 small stitches, and shifted the jacket's closure so the excess fabric created a deliberate asymmetrical fold. I used a shoelace inside the waistband to shape the pants, and turned the oversized shirt into a loose underlayer. 10 minutes later, I looked as if the outfit had been designed to appear careless. The audience watched the transformation from angles I could not see. Ethan entered and inspected the result. He tugged 1 sleeve, checked the hidden stitch, and asked how I knew the proportions were correct. I told him measurements did not stop existing when the mirror disappeared. That sentence became the first viral clip of the week. Ethan did not care. He had 6 more days. At breakfast, the table was filled with foods designed to inflame skin, disturb energy, or leave stains during the live broadcast. I chose the simplest combination, adjusted the portions, and explained nothing. Viewers expected a dramatic nutrition lesson. I gave them discipline instead. At noon, Ethan sent me to a crowded shopping district wearing the altered discount outfit. I had no money and no security beside me. People recognized me within minutes. Some wanted photographs, some wanted to touch the jacket, some shouted Brooke's name. One man replayed the rejection clip on a portable speaker and followed me down the street. I could have ignored him. Instead, I stopped. The crowd formed instantly. I asked him which version he preferred. He expected anger and had prepared a joke. The question disarmed him. He looked from the old video to my face and admitted the new version was better. I asked whether that meant people could change. He said yes. I thanked him for carrying the evidence. The crowd laughed with me, not at him. He lowered the speaker and asked for a photograph. Ethan had wanted provocation. I turned the provoker into a witness. On the second day, the house filled with guests instructed to attack every insecurity I had ever shown. They criticized my face, called the transformation fake, accused me of buying confidence, mocked Auraline, praised Marcus, defended Brooke, and suggested Grace had designed every intelligent move I had made. That last accusation almost made me smile. Grace would have hated the idea that I followed instructions so well. The dinner lasted 4 hours. I responded only when a response improved the room. I asked questions that exposed contradictions. I agreed with insults that contained truth. I ignored attacks designed only to produce reaction. One guest said I had become attractive but still looked like someone terrified of being ordinary. That sentence landed closer than the others. My pulse rose. Ethan saw it from the biometric monitor. I saw him see it, so I did not deny it. I said ordinary was not an insult. Remaining ordinary after discovering your own potential was. The table went silent. The system did not activate because I had spent nothing, but the measurable improvement was visible anyway. My pulse recovered faster than it ever had during Grace's early training. Ethan wrote something in his notebook. On the 3rd day, he attacked my body. The house opened into an outdoor course built from moving platforms, hanging fabric, sudden rain, wind machines, and narrow glass paths. I had to cross while answering questions from viewers selected at random. It looked ridiculous. That was the point. People can appear composed in a chair. Ethan wanted to separate performance from control. The first platform shifted left while a viewer asked whether I had undergone surgery. I answered that medical care was not a moral failure, and landed on the next platform without looking down. The rain began as another viewer asked whether I still loved Brooke. I stepped through a curtain of water and said love without respect was only memory wearing perfume. That line was not prepared. Grace later claimed it sounded prepared, which I considered a compliment. A wall opened. 3 harmless cakes launched toward my head. I caught one, turned under the second and let the third strike the jacket. Then I removed the stained outer layer and revealed the clean shirt beneath. The camera crew laughed. Ethan stared at the control room with the expression of a man who had just discovered his opponent owned the same absurd training equipment. He had no way to know about my cake corridor. That was the first moment I enjoyed the week. On the 4th day, Brooke entered the house. Ethan had not warned me. He wanted the surprise to be real. Brooke arrived wearing one of Marcus's newest dresses and a calm expression she had practiced for the cameras. She said she wanted closure. The audience count doubled in minutes. For 6 months she had spoken about me when I was absent. Now she had to sit across from me without a stage beneath her feet. She began gently. She said the rooftop had gone too far. She claimed she had been young, pressured, and encouraged by people who wanted content. She said she regretted the laughter, though she never apologized for creating it. Then she changed direction. She described the old Adrian as kind, thoughtful, and warm. She said the new Adrian seemed cold. She asked whether becoming beautiful had cost me the part of myself worth loving. It was an intelligent attack. If I denied changing, I looked dishonest. If I admitted becoming colder, she became the person who knew the real me. If I attacked her, she proved I was still wounded. Ethan watched from the edge of the room. Grace watched through the control feed. Brooke leaned forward and asked whether all of this had been for her. I waited, not for effect. I wanted to answer accurately. The haircut had been for survival. The first suit had been for revenge. The voice training had been for control. Orline had become something larger. So I told her the truth. She had been the match, not the fire. Brooke's eyes tightened. I thanked her again for forcing me to see the distance between intelligence and influence. Then I said the kind version of me had not disappeared. He had simply stopped giving kindness to people who treated it as weakness. The audience reacted before she could. Brooke tried to reclaim control by reaching across the table and touching my hand. I moved my hand to pour her water before she reached it. The gesture looked polite. It also denied her the image she wanted. She left an hour later with less sympathy than she had brought in. Ethan waited until the door closed. He asked whether I had predicted every question. I said no. I had predicted every need. Brooke needed to prove she still mattered. Once I understood that, the words were decoration. Ethan's notebook remained closed for the rest of the day. On the 5th day, he attacked competence. I was taken to a live event with no description of what I would be required to do. The stage contained a piano, cooking equipment, a rack of damaged clothing, a stack of foreign newspapers, and a small boxing ring. The audience voted on tasks. I had to repair a torn coat while answering questions in another language, prepare a meal from unfamiliar ingredients, play a melody after hearing it once, and spar with a masked athlete while delivering a product pitch. It should have been impossible. 6 months earlier it would have been. But the system had rewarded education as eagerly as appearance. I had paid experts to improve memory, languages, cooking, rhythm, hand coordination, and combat. None of those abilities were visible in a photograph, which made their reveal more powerful. I repaired the coat with 3 folds and 1 line of stitching. I summarized the newspaper article and explained the joke hidden in its headline. I turned the ingredients into a simple meal instead of pretending I knew a complicated recipe. I played the melody with 1 wrong note, stopped, repeated the wrong note deliberately, and transformed it into variation. Then I entered the ring wearing the repaired coat. The masked athlete attacked while I explained that Orline was not armor against life. It was clothing designed to keep the wearer composed while life attacked. I blocked, turned, ducked, and continued speaking. At the end, the athlete swept my leg. I fell. The audience gasped. I landed on 1 knee, adjusted the repaired cuff, and finished the final sentence from the floor. The applause shook the stage. Ethan had created a test of hidden substance. He had also given me the best advertisement of my career. On the 6th day, he removed sleep. Not completely. He was too precise to create real medical danger. But every time I entered deep sleep, lights activated and a new task began. I had to make decisions while tired, speak without slurring, and maintain routines when my mind wanted shortcuts. This was the hardest day. Beauty collapses quickly under exhaustion. The face swells. The eyes lose focus. Patience disappears. At 4 a.m, I snapped at a camera operator after a light hit my eyes. The moment lasted less than 2 seconds. The clip spread before sunrise. Marcus's supporters declared the mask had fallen. Brooke posted a message about finally seeing the real person. Ethan showed me the reactions and waited. I could have blamed fatigue. I could have argued that anyone would react the same way. Instead, I found the operator, apologized on camera, and asked the audience to replay the moment as often as they wanted. Then I explained exactly what had happened in my body. Stress, sleep loss, narrowed attention, defensive tone. I turned the failure into a live lesson on recovery. The operator accepted the apology. The clip of the apology surpassed the clip of the mistake. That was when I understood something Ethan had known from the beginning. Perfection was fragile because one crack could destroy the illusion. Growth was stronger because every crack became evidence. I had built Arlene around transformation, yet I still presented myself as finished. That contradiction was dangerous. I changed the brand message before breakfast. Arlene would no longer promise the final form. It would promise the next one. On the 7th day, Ethan gave me nothing. No trap, no task, no guest. The house remained silent. That was the final test. Without pressure, I had to create attention myself. Most performers fear attack. The clever ones fear emptiness. I spent the morning training, the afternoon repairing the week's damaged clothing, and the evening arranging every cheap item I had worn into a small runway through the center of the house. I invited the camera crew to choose pieces and alter them with me. I taught them the same simple adjustments I had used on the first day. By sunset, people who had spent the week filming my image were improving their own. The broadcast changed tone. It stopped being an examination and became a workshop. Viewers began posting their own altered clothes, posture tests, and before and after clips. The No Mirror Week spread beyond the house. I had entered as the subject. I left as the standard. At midnight, the transparent box opened and my phone returned. The final audience count was larger than Marcus's last 3 global shows combined. Ethan joined me outside. Rain had begun again, as if reality enjoyed repeating images. He admitted I had passed. I told him he had improved me. That was true. His week had revealed a weakness in my brand, forced me to recover from public failure, and proved my skills survived without money. The system had not returned $1 because I had not spent $1. But the moment I paid Ethan's production company for the complete performance analysis, biometric data, and behavioral review, the system confirmed measurable improvement. The fee was $20 million, $2 billion returned. My phone vibrated inside my hand. Ethan's eyes moved toward it. Only for a fraction of a second, but he saw the timing. He asked whether something good had happened. I said the week had just paid for itself. That answer was dangerous, but denying the obvious would have been worse. Ethan looked back at the house, then at me. He said every time I paid for real improvement, my available power seemed to rise almost immediately. He could not prove the amount, but he believed the relationship was direct. I asked whether he planned to announce that I possessed a magic bank account. He said the public would laugh at him. I told him they had laughed at me too. He almost smiled. Then he gave me a warning. Marcus had stopped trying to buy Arlene. He was preparing Crown Week as a public execution. Brooke had agreed to become the face of his campaign. Every event would compare his history against my sudden rise. Ethan said Marcus's greatest skill was not design. It was making people feel foolish for desiring anything he had not approved. I knew that already. Marcus sold permission to feel superior. I sold permission to change. Only one philosophy could control the next generation. Grace met me at the workshop after the broadcast. She had watched my mistake, my apology, Brooke's visit, and Ethan's final deduction. She did not congratulate me. She asked whether I understood how close Ethan was. I said he had found the shape of the secret, not the mechanism. She asked whether I trusted her. I told her trust was not the same as ignorance. She knew enough to be dangerous and had stayed anyway. Grace looked at the framed note from Ethan, the old jacket, and the first Arlene prototype. Then she asked the question she had avoided for months. Where did the money come from? I could have lied. I had lied to crowds, rivals, and cameras without hesitation, but Grace had trained the voice I would use to deceive her. A false answer would insult both of us. So I told her a smaller truth. Every dollar I invested in genuine improvement returned far more than I spent. I did not say 100 times. I did not describe the messages. I did not explain when the power had appeared. Grace stared at me for a long time. Then she laughed once, quietly, because the impossible explanation made more sense than every normal one. She asked whether empty luxury returned anything. I said no. She looked relieved. Apparently the universe having standards made the miracle easier to accept. Then her expression changed. She understood the danger immediately. If improvement produced wealth, I had a reason never to stop tearing myself apart for flaws. She said Marcus and Ethan were not my greatest threats. The mirror was. I told her that was why I had just survived a week without one. She said surviving was not the same as escaping. I did not answer. Outside the workshop, workers raised the first giant Aurelian emblem over the entrance. It was a broken mirror shaped into an upward point. Across the city, Marcus unveiled his Crown Week campaign. Brooke stood beside him in gold while my old rooftop image appeared behind them. The message was simple. Transformation could be purchased, legacy could not. I watched the announcement once. Then I spent $80 million preparing to prove that legacy was only transformation people had stopped questioning. The $80 million did not buy billboards. It bought pressure. I hired the best people I could find to create conditions no normal model, designer or founder would ever face. Then I paid them to make those conditions worse. I practiced tailoring inside a room cold enough to numb my fingers. I delivered speeches while suspended upside down over a pool. I learned to identify fabric by touch in total darkness. I walked through a wind tunnel while the floor rotated beneath me and speakers played conflicting rhythms. I trained breath control in a submerged glass chamber where every movement sent the fabric floating around my face. I spent 12 hours in reduced gravity learning how clothing moved when weight stopped behaving. I studied negotiation in 7 languages with experts instructed to insult me whenever my grammar failed. I took memory training until I could meet 200 people once, remember their names, and recall the insecurity each tried hardest to hide. Grace watched the schedule and said I was preparing for a fashion show as if it were an invasion. I told her Marcus had ruled the same territory for 20 years. That made it an invasion. When the training produced measurable gains, the system returned $8 billion. I used part of it to build spectacle and part to build something Marcus would not expect. Orline opened free improvement studios across the city during Crown Week. No velvet ropes, no impossible prices at the entrance. People could measure posture, movement, grooming, and vocal projection. They could learn how color changed perception, how small alterations transformed cheap clothing, and how confidence looked before it felt natural. The luxury pieces remained rare and expensive. The knowledge did not. Marcus believed luxury depended on distance. I wanted millions of people to feel that Aurelian had given them something before they could afford to buy anything. Grace called it generous. I called it occupation. She said those answers were why she never knew whether to admire me or worry. Both reactions were useful. Crown Week opened with Marcus's parade through the city. Giant gold banners covered buildings. Famous faces arrived in cars polished like mirrors. Music rolled down the avenues. His newest collection appeared on a long white runway surrounded by fountains. Brooke opened the show. She wore a gold dress designed to look liquid under the lights. The crowd cheered before she took the first step because Marcus had trained them to treat recognition as quality. I watched from the roof of a moving train. The abandoned elevated line crossed directly above Marcus's final runway. He knew it was there. He assumed it was dark. At the exact moment Brooke reached the end of his stage, the city lights along the rail shut off, and the train emerged from a tunnel. Its roof had been transformed into a narrow black runway. 12 Aurelian models moved along it as the train crossed above the fountains, their coats opened in the speed. Reflective seams created lines of light that seemed to fly through the air. I stood at the rear. The train was moving fast enough to turn one mistake into a headline. I had trained faster. When we passed above Brooke, I stepped onto a raised platform, turned into the wind, and let the final coat unfold behind me. The fabric became a silver arc over the entire train. Every camera on Marcus's runway tilted upward. His opening became my entrance. I did not stop the train. I did not wave. I did not acknowledge the event below. Nothing makes powerful people feel smaller than becoming scenery. The clip reached 100 million views before Marcus's parade ended. He responded the next morning with a campaign attacking sudden transformation. His screens showed ancient buildings, old paintings, heirlooms, and generations of his designs. A voice explained that real value survived time. Then my rejection photograph appeared for half a second. The message was clear. A new face could not erase an old truth. I admired the attack. It was elegant and almost effective. So I made the old photograph our main image. Aurelian screens appeared beside us within hours. They showed the same sleeping face, the same bad hair, the same stained shirt. Beneath it were 4 words: "Old is not eternal." Then the image changed into footage of ordinary people improving posture, repairing clothes, learning to speak, and walking through the free studios with their heads higher. Marcus sold history. I sold possibility. Possibility always has a larger market. By the 3rd day, the lines outside Oraline wrapped around blocks. People wore broken mirror symbols drawn on jackets, shoes, and faces. Some could not afford our clothes and created their own versions. Traditional luxury experts called it vulgar. That made it spread faster. Marcus changed tactics. He accused Oraline's measurable improvements of being theater. He claimed any jacket could improve posture if cameras and coaches told the wearer to stand differently. Ethan offered to test the claim. Neither Marcus nor I could refuse without looking afraid. The test took place inside a circular arena. 100 volunteers wore unmarked garments from both brands. They did not know which was which. Motion cameras measured stride, shoulder position, breathing, comfort, and reaction under stress. Marcus expected history to become evidence. It did not. His clothes photographed beautifully. They also restricted movement, overheated under lights, and pulled at the neck after extended wear. Oraline improved posture and balance in most of the volunteers, but not all. 7 people moved worse in our designs. My team had wanted to remove those results from the presentation. I refused. I stood before the audience and explained the failures myself. The cut was wrong for certain body shapes. The shoulder guidance overcorrected. One lining created friction during turns. Then I announced that the pieces would not be sold until redesigned. Marcus called the admission weakness. The audience called it proof. Ethan looked almost pleased. He understood why I had done it. A perfect result would have looked manipulated. Visible failure made the larger success believable. More importantly, I had not planned the 7 failures. I had simply recovered from them. No mirror week had changed me. The system confirmed that improvement after I paid for the full testing program. $300 million became $30 billion. Ethan saw my phone vibrate again. This time he did not look at it. He looked at my face. He was testing whether I would check whether he had noticed. I did not. Our duel had become so quiet that the public saw only 2 men standing beside a chart. To us, it was a room full of knives. That evening, Brooke released the voice recordings. They came from our relationship, recorded during nights when I believed she was listening because she cared. In one, I complained that people were easy to predict. In another, I described a classmate's need for approval and explained how I could have controlled him by giving praise at the right moment. In a third, I said intelligence without influence was torture, because I could see the better decision and still watch fools choose the worse one. The recordings were real. They were also devastating. The public had accepted ambition, vanity, and revenge because those feelings were familiar. Cold analysis frightened them. Suddenly, every charming moment from my rise looked calculated. Marcus's campaign used the clips immediately. Brooke appeared in an interview and said the old Adrian had always wanted power. The new face had only made it easier for him to get. For the first time, Oraline's sales slowed. Grace entered my office carrying a tablet filled with collapsing approval numbers. She did not ask whether the recordings were fake. She knew they were not. She asked whether I still believed people were pieces. I told her pieces could become players. She did not appreciate the answer. My first instinct was to destroy Brooke's credibility. I had enough information. She had lied in interviews, staged private moments, and mocked supporters after cameras turned away. A carefully edited release could have ended her career by morning. I prepared it, then I watched her recording again. Brooke sat beneath soft light and spoke about fear. Not fear of me hurting her, fear that every kind gesture had been a strategy. She said being understood by me had started to feel like being trapped inside a room where I knew every exit. That description was more accurate than I wanted it to be. If I responded by using private knowledge to destroy her, I would prove the accusation. Ethan knew that. He had not created the leak, but he understood the trap immediately. He posted no analysis. Silence from him was louder than accusation. Marcus expected revenge. Brooke expected denial. The public expected an apology written by a team. I gave them none of those. I went live from the first training theater, the room where 50 paid performers had once mocked me under Brooks' video. I showed the motion cameras, the speech screens, the wind equipment, and the old jacket still hanging on the wall. Then I admitted that I studied people. I admitted I planned conversations, entrances, reactions, and even silence. I said charm without awareness was luck, and I had never trusted luck. I also admitted that understanding someone created a responsibility I had not always respected. That was not an apology to Brooke. It was a correction to myself. I played the recordings in full, including the parts she had removed. In those missing moments, I had often turned the same analysis against myself. I described my own envy, cowardice, resentment, and hunger for control with equal cruelty. The complete picture was not kinder. It was honest. Then Grace entered the frame without warning me. She told the audience I was the most calculating person she had ever met. She said I had designed rooms to attack my own weaknesses, burned good work because it was not excellent, and treated social skill like combat. She also said the changes were real. She had watched me choose correction over comfort when nobody was recording. She had watched me lose money rather than pretend a useless object improved me. She had watched me apologize when strategy would have made denial easier. Grace did not defend my heart. She defended my discipline. That was more convincing. Approval numbers began rising before the broadcast ended. I had prepared Brooke's destruction and chosen not to release it. Only Grace knew. She asked later whether restraint had been moral or strategic. I told her the strongest strategy survives moral examination. She said that was not an answer. It was the only one I had. The system surprised me that night. I paid for a series of private sessions with psychologists, teachers, critics, and former clients who had felt manipulated by powerful people. I wanted to improve the way I used insight, not merely sharpen it. At first, the system returned nothing. Listening was not improvement if I treated every confession as data. So I listened again without planning a response. That was harder than the wind tunnel. I heard how shame could motivate action and still damage the person. I heard how luxury campaigns made people hate themselves before offering a product as permission to stop. I heard how admiration could turn into dependence when a public figure made followers believe only he understood their potential. Aureline was moving toward that edge. I had built a philosophy of transformation, but if every message said people were unfinished, I could make them permanently dissatisfied and permanently loyal. Marcus would have used that power without hesitation. The old Adrian might have too. I changed the campaign. We stopped asking people what they hated about themselves. We asked what they wanted to be able to do. Stand without pain. Speak without shrinking. Enter a room without apologizing. Wear something beautiful without feeling disguised. The difference was subtle. It transformed the brand. When the system confirmed measurable improvement in leadership, empathy, and judgment, the return was larger than any appearance upgrade I had received. $50 billion appeared. Grace saw my expression and asked how much. I told her enough to purchase every billboard Marcus had rented and leave them blank. She asked whether I would. I said no. Blankness was his strategy now. Mine was movement. Crown Week's fourth night belonged to a show called the Hall of Legacy. Marcus displayed his most famous designs inside a palace of glass. Each room recreated a different era. Music, scent, lighting, and famous photographs surrounded the clothes until visitors felt they were walking through history. It was brilliant. I could not beat memory by pretending it did not matter. So I placed Arlene's show outside. No palace, no walls, just a staircase rising 200 feet above the plaza, built from transparent panels. At the bottom stood people wearing the clothes they had entered our studios in. At each landing, they changed one thing: posture, fit, color, movement, voice. By the time they reached the top, they were not transformed into models. They were transformed into more deliberate versions of themselves. I climbed last. At every landing, I removed one luxury element: the coat, the vest, the polished shoes, the jewelry Marcus had expected me to use. By the top, I wore a simple white shirt and black pants I had cut myself. The crowd below could still recognize me from movement alone. That was the point. Marcus's clothes needed the palace. I had become the palace. Then the storm began. Not artificial wind this time. Real weather rolled over the city. Rain struck the glass steps. Guests ran under the Hall of Legacy's roof. Marcus assumed our show was finished. I continued upward. The staircase became slippery. Wind pulled at the shirt. Cameras struggled to focus through rain. Grace shouted from below that the final platform was unsafe. I had trained for worse. I reached the top, turned toward the storm, and raised one hand. The entire transparent staircase lit from within. Every step displayed a different image from my 6-month transformation. The bad haircut, the dental brace, the posture rig, the bruises, the torn coats, the cake on my face, the moment Brooke failed to recognize me. The crowd emerged from shelter to watch. Rain ran down the glass while my old selves glowed beneath my feet. I did not stand above them because I was ashamed. I stood above them because they had carried me there. The image became the defining photograph of Crown Week. Marcus's palace was beautiful. My staircase made people feel something. That was when he stopped treating the conflict as business. The next morning, he announced the crown trial. One final event would decide which house represented the future of luxury. Marcus and I would each design, create, model, and defend one complete look before a live global audience. The event would take place at Mirror Tower, the tallest glass building in the city. No assistance during creation, no prepared garment, no personal money during the final 24 hours. The materials would be chosen by Ethan. I understood immediately. Marcus wanted to prove I was a manufactured face dependent on teams and money. Ethan wanted to remove the system and see what remained. Brooke would host the event, which meant Marcus wanted my oldest wound standing beneath my newest test. Grace read the rules and asked whether the trap was too obvious. I told her obvious traps were often the hardest to avoid because refusing them still looked like defeat. She asked what material I hoped Ethan would choose. I looked at the old jacket on the workshop wall. Something cheap, something humiliating. Something I already knew how to turn into evidence. Mirror Tower was designed to make people feel watched by the sky. Its outer walls reflected the entire city. At night, every light below appeared to climb the glass. Marcus had held his greatest events there for years, but the crown trial would use the building differently. 2 transparent workrooms stood at the base, one for Marcus, one for me. Above them, a narrow runway spiraled around the outside of the tower all the way to the roof. The final walk would begin at street level and rise more than 100 floors through open air. Grace stared at the structure and asked whether normal fashion had offended everyone involved. I told her normal fashion did not deserve a global audience. We had 5 days before the trial. I could not prepare a garment, but I could prepare myself. I spent $100 million on accelerated emergency training inside an exact replica of the tower's exterior. I practiced climbing wet glass ladders, moving through heavy wind, repairing fabric with numb hands, and controlling panic at extreme height. I spent another $100 million on rapid construction drills. Experts gave me random materials in 1 hour to build clothing that could move, protect, and transform. Plastic sheets, rope, curtains, packing foam, paper, broken umbrellas. Once, they gave me a pile of children's inflatable pool toys. The result looked ridiculous. It also survived a fall from 3 stories and became a viral prototype after Grace wore it to lunch without explaining why it squeaked. I paid for one final course in live crisis leadership. The instructors created emergencies during public performances and judged whether my decisions protected people or merely protected my image. I failed the first test. A light structure collapsed near the mock audience. I moved toward the most visible danger because cameras were pointed there, missing a quieter hazard behind me. The instructors showed me the footage. I had chosen heroism over responsibility without realizing it. That discovery disturbed me more than the failure. So I repeated the test until my attention tracked actual risk instead of dramatic appearance. When the system confirmed improvement in emergency response, design under pressure, and high-altitude control, $20 billion returned. Grace asked whether I had become richer than Marcus. I said I had become more prepared. The first fact was temporary. The second could decide everything. Ethan visited the workshop on the night before the trial. He found me cutting identical squares from 10 different cheap fabrics while wearing a blindfold. He waited until I identified all 10 by touch. Then he placed his silver coin on the table. He said he had calculated the multiplier. My scissors stopped for less than half a second. He noticed. Ethan explained the pattern without excitement. The first haircut cost $30. My spending rose by roughly $3,000. The dental payment was $500. My next available capital appeared to rise by $50,000. The tailored wardrobe cost 2,000. 200,000 entered my orbit almost immediately. Later purchases were harder to isolate because the brand generated real revenue, but the early pattern was clean. 100 times, he said the words quietly. The room felt smaller. Grace stood at the far table, watching both of us. I asked Ethan what he planned to do with the theory. He said theories were not proof. Then he asked whether the power rewarded any purchase. I looked at the framed photograph of the diamond mask. He followed my eyes. He already knew the answer. No. Empty luxury did nothing. He asked whether improvement had to be genuine. I did not respond. My silence answered for me. Ethan picked up the coin and rolled it across his fingers. He said the system, whatever it was, had created an unusual problem. Most unlimited wealth corrupted through indulgence. Mine punished indulgence and rewarded discipline. That made me harder to expose and more dangerous to oppose. I asked whether he thought I was dangerous. He said I had turned self-improvement into capital, capital into attention, and attention into authority. Every attack made me study the weakness it revealed. Every study made me stronger. Every improvement gave me more resources to answer the next attack. He called it a closed loop of escalation. I called it efficiency. Ethan said the difference between efficiency and tyranny was whether other people were allowed to choose the destination. Grace did not look at me. I knew the sentence was meant for both of us. Then Ethan explained the materials for the crown trial. Marcus and I would receive identical containers filled with items collected from ordinary lost and found rooms, donation bins, damaged stage sets, and discarded event decorations. Nothing rare. Nothing branded. Nothing worth respecting because of price. At the center of each container would be one personal item. Marcus would receive the first coat he had ever designed. I would receive the jacket I wore on the night Brooke rejected me. I looked toward the wall. The hook was empty. Ethan had taken it before entering. Grace's expression sharpened, but I raised one hand. I had expected something cheap. I had not expected something sacred. Ethan wanted to know whether I could cut apart the symbol that had built my identity. If I protected it, sentiment controlled me. If I destroyed it carelessly, transformation became rejection instead of growth. It was his best test. I told him the jacket belonged in the box. He asked whether I was sure. I said I had been cutting it apart for 6 months. The trial began the next evening. The plaza around Mirror Tower filled before sunset. Screens covered nearby buildings. Drones circled the glass. The spiral runway glowed like a silver line wrapped around a blade. Brooke stood at the center stage in Marcus's gold dress. She looked flawless and exhausted. For weeks, Marcus had placed her between us because she attracted attention from both sides. She had become more famous than ever and less in control of what that fame meant. To his audience, she was the woman with standards. To mine, she was the mistake that created me. To Ethan, she was emotional evidence. Nobody asked what she wanted to become. I had once resented her for using me as content. Now the entire world used her the same way. The irony almost felt like justice. Almost. Marcus entered to thunderous applause. He wore a simple dark suit with his gold emblem at the throat. No theatrical arrival. He understood that kings did not run onto their own battlefield. I entered from the crowd. No aircraft, no train, no lights. People noticed me one row at a time until the reaction spread through the plaza like fire moving across paper. The entrance looked effortless. It had taken 20 minutes of precise timing. Ethan opened the containers. The materials were worse than expected. Faded curtains, torn uniforms, plastic advertising banners, bent wire, damaged umbrellas, cheap belts, foam padding, broken necklaces, shoes in mismatched sizes. A roll of silver emergency blanket material, and my old jacket. It looked smaller than I remembered. The stain on one cuff remained, the shoulders curved inward from the shape my body had forced into it, one button hung by a thread. Across the stage, Marcus lifted his first coat. For the first time since I met him, his face softened. That coat had built his name. Mine had carried my humiliation. We were each holding a former self. The clock began. 24 hours. No assistants could enter the glass rooms. No money could be spent. No finished piece could leave until the runway opened. Millions watched every cut. Marcus began by studying everything. He moved slowly, testing weight, tension, and color. His skill was real. He had not ruled luxury for 2 decades through reputation alone. Within 1 hour, he had separated the gold lining from his first coat without damaging the outer structure. He used bent wire to build a strong internal frame. He cut the faded curtains into long panels and layered them over the frame until the shape resembled ceremonial armor. It was magnificent. The public expected me to move faster. I did nothing for the first 40 minutes. I wore the old jacket and stood inside the glass room, the shoulders pulled inward. The sleeves were short now. The fabric looked dull against my skin. Cameras pressed close to the walls, waiting for emotion. I remembered the rooftop, the laughter, the squeaking shoes, Brooke's expression. Then I remembered the barber's mirror. The jacket had not failed me. I had asked it to hide a body I refused to understand. I removed it and opened the back seam carefully. Instead of cutting away the curved shoulders, I preserved them as the inner layer. I used the shape as a record of my old posture. Over it, I built a second shoulder line from umbrella ribs and silver emergency fabric. The new structure rose from the old one without erasing it. The garment would contain both versions at once. That was the concept, but Ethan had not designed the trial to reward concept alone. At the 6th hour, Brooke entered each workroom for a 10-minute interview. She visited Marcus first. He used the time beautifully. He spoke about history, patience, and honoring the hands that came before. He made the damaged materials sound noble by placing them inside his legacy. Then Brooke entered my room. We had not been alone since before the rejection. The cameras remained outside the glass, but every word was recorded. She looked at the open jacket and asked whether cutting it hurt. I told her keeping it unchanged would hurt more. She asked whether I had ever planned to destroy her career after the voice recordings. I could have lied. I said yes. Her expression changed. I told her I had prepared everything and chosen not to use it. She asked whether I expected gratitude. I said no. Gratitude given under threat was only obedience with better posture. For a moment, she looked like the person I had dated before cameras and ambition had turned every feeling into material. Then she asked whether I had loved her. The clock continued behind us. Marcus would have used the question to create a perfect answer. Ethan would have used it to measure hesitation. I answered for myself. I had loved the version of her that existed when nobody was watching. I had also ignored the evidence that she loved being watched more. Brooke looked toward the cameras beyond the glass. She asked whether I thought she could change. I said everyone could, but wanting the result was not the same as wanting the work. Her 10 minutes ended. Before leaving, she touched the old jacket once. This time, I did not move my hand away. At the 12th hour, Marcus's design was already beautiful. Gold armor over flowing dark panels, with pieces of his first coat visible at the heart. It made him look like a ruler walking out of a ruined palace. Mine looked unfinished because it was unfinished. I had built adjustable seams along the side, hidden cords through the back, and a series of folds that could change the silhouette. The silver emergency material remained concealed beneath the dull outer fabric. The audience compared still images and declared Marcus the winner. He smiled at the cameras. I kept working. At the 18th hour, Ethan introduced a sound test. We had to continue while recordings played through the rooms. Marcus heard critics predicting the end of his empire, customers calling his work outdated, and younger designers describing him as a museum with a pulse. His hands slowed, but they did not shake. I heard the rooftop laughter. Then the voice notes. Then Grace warning that the mirror was my greatest threat. Then Ethan saying a man chasing perfection wanted control. Finally, the system's first message was recreated by a neutral voice. $30 invested, $3,000 returned. My needle stopped. Ethan had placed the exact numbers in the broadcast. The public heard them as part of his theory. Most viewers treated it as metaphor, but I knew he was watching for confirmation. I resumed the same stitch at the same speed. Inside, I accepted a new fact. Ethan knew enough. Not to prove the system, but to predict my behavior. That made the final hours more dangerous. At the 23rd hour, Marcus finished. He stood in the center of his room wearing gold and black. His first coat transformed into ceremonial armor. The frame broadened his shoulders. The panels moved like banners. He looked exactly like the ruler the public remembered. Applause filled the plaza. I still had no visible final shape. Grace stood outside my room with both hands clasped. She could not help. Brooke watched from the stage. Ethan watched from nowhere I could identify. I put on the garment. At first it resembled the old jacket extended into a long, dull coat. The shoulders remained curved. The color looked lifeless. A murmur of disappointment moved through the crowd. Then I pulled the first hidden cord. The inner shoulder collapsed backward and the new frame rose above it. My posture changed in one motion. I pulled the second cord. The side folds tightened, turning the loose coat into a sharp line around my body. I opened both arms. The outer gray panels separated, revealing the silver emergency material beneath. Light struck it from every direction. The old jacket remained visible at the center, not hidden, but transformed into the darkest point of a garment that seemed to ignite around it. The crowd erupted. Marcus's design represented a king's surviving ruin. Mine represented ruin becoming fuel. The workrooms opened. The runway began. Marcus walked first. He climbed the outer spiral with the calm of a man who had spent his life being observed. Wind caught the dark panels exactly as he intended. Gold flashed against the tower. Every step looked carved into history. I respected him more with every floor. That made defeating him necessary. I stepped onto the spiral. The city spread below. Cameras floated beside the glass. My coat shifted with each change in wind, moving between dull gray and blinding silver. The higher I climbed, the more the old jacket appeared to break open. Brooke followed on a separate central platform rising through the tower's exterior. She would meet us at the roof to host the final defense. Ethan's voice came through hidden speakers, asking questions as we climbed. He asked Marcus whether legacy could adapt without losing identity. Marcus answered that identity was what remained after change removed everything weak. He asked me whether endless transformation meant never accepting myself. I answered that acceptance was not surrender. I could value the current form without pretending it was the final one. The wind rose near the 70th floor. Rain struck the glass. The forecast had predicted clear weather. The storm moved in faster than anyone expected. The audience below cheered, assuming it was part of the event. Then lightning hit the upper antenna. The tower went dark. Every screen vanished. The exterior runway lights died. Brooke's central platform stopped between floors. The drones scattered from the electrical field. Wind slammed against the tower with a sound like an animal trying to enter. For 3 seconds, nobody moved. Then emergency lights flickered red along the spiral. Marcus gripped the rail. His gold frame had become heavy in the rain. The long panels wrapped around his legs. The design was built for controlled wind, not a real storm. My coat tightened automatically as the wet cords contracted. The emergency silver beneath the outer layer caught the red light, making my body visible through the darkness. I heard a sharp sound below. Brooke's platform had tilted. One side of her gold dress had caught in the stopped mechanism. The fabric pulled tight as she tried to move. Her safety line held, but she was pinned against the glass 80 floors above the street. Cameras were down. The public could not see us. For one moment, the entire event stopped being performance. Then phone screens began lighting across the plaza. Thousands of tiny white lights pointed upward. The audience was still watching. I calculated distance, wind, and the position of the maintenance ladder beside the spiral. Marcus shouted that emergency crews were coming. He was right. Waiting was the safe choice. Then I saw the platform tilt again. I had trained to identify actual risk instead of dramatic heroism. The risk was increasing. I secured my coat, crossed the barrier, and stepped onto the maintenance frame outside the runway. The wind hit hard enough to lift my feet. I lowered my center of gravity and moved down the wet lattice. Every ridiculous hour in the wind tunnel returned to me. Every high-altitude drill, every emergency exercise. The system had given money for the improvements, but the money was useless now. Only the improvements remained. Brooke saw me descending and shouted for me to stop. 6 months earlier, she had rejected me because standing beside me lowered her value. Now I crossed the outside of a dark tower to reach her. The irony would have been funny if the drop beneath us had not been real. I reached the platform, anchored one arm through the frame, and cut the trap section of her dress with the small tailoring blade hidden in my cuff. Marcus's gold fabric tore away. Brooke slipped. I caught her by the wrist. For 1 second, she hung over the city while rain ran between our hands. The old Adrian would have frozen. The new Adrian pulled her against the frame, wrapped the silver layer of my coat around her safety line, and guided her onto the maintenance ladder. The crowd below saw only 2 bright shapes moving through darkness. Phone videos began capturing us from every angle. Brooke looked at my face from inches away. No cameras close enough to hear. No stage. No advantage. She said I had come back for her. I told her not to misunderstand the rescue. I would have crossed for anyone. That answer hurt her. It also saved both of us from turning danger into romance. We climbed toward the roof. Halfway up, Marcus moved onto the maintenance frame above us. His design restricted his legs, so he tore away the long black panels with his hands. The ceremonial armor became smaller, rougher, and more human. He could have waited. He chose to help. Together, the three of us reached the upper platform as emergency power returned. Lights exploded across the tower. The cameras reconnected. The global audience saw Marcus with half his design torn away, Brooke wrapped in my silver lining, and me wearing the old gray jacket exposed beneath the missing outer panels. None of us looked perfect. We looked real. The applause from the plaza reached the roof through the storm. The event organizers wanted to end the trial. Marcus refused. So did I. Ethan appeared on the rooftop wearing a raincoat and holding no coin. Even he had not predicted the storm. He said the final defense would continue, but the original garments had been altered by necessity. The audience would judge what remained. Marcus stood beneath the emergency lights. Without the long panels, his gold frame resembled battle-damaged armor. He spoke about legacy not as preservation, but as the courage to tear away your own masterpiece when it prevented movement. It was the best speech he had given all week. Then I stepped forward. My silver outer layer was wrapped around Brooke. The dramatic transformation mechanism had been cut. The garment on my body looked close to the old jacket again, only sharper at the seams. I could have asked Brooke to return the silver fabric. I did not. I spoke wearing the least impressive version. I said improvement was not proven when conditions were perfect. It was proven when the beautiful plan failed and the person remained capable. I explained that every visible upgrade I had purchased would eventually fade. Hair grew, skin aged, clothes tore, trends changed. Even confidence could collapse under the wrong pressure. The only lasting luxury was the ability to rebuild. The rooftop became silent. Then Ethan activated his final test. 2 ordinary volunteers stepped from the elevator. They had been selected before the storm. One was roughly Marcus's height but carried weight differently. The other was shorter than me, with narrow shoulders and nervous posture. Ethan announced that founders were often praised because custom clothing made powerful bodies look more powerful, but Oraline claimed clothing should improve the wearer, so Marcus and I had to exchange our garments with the volunteers. Marcus looked at his gold frame. It was rigid, built around his exact measurements. On another body, the shoulders would sit wrong and the chest structure would shift. My damaged coat looked simple, but the adjustable seams remained. I had built them from the beginning. Ethan saw my expression and understood. I had predicted not the storm, but him. He would never let the final test remain about 2 already powerful men. He needed to know whether our philosophies survived contact with someone ordinary. I fitted my coat onto the nervous volunteer. The side cords shortened, the shoulder frame lowered. The back seam opened slightly. Within seconds, the garment changed shape. More important, the subtle inner structure guided the volunteer upright without forcing him. His chin rose, his hands left his pockets. When Ethan asked him to speak, his voice carried farther than before. The motion cameras confirmed measurable improvement. Marcus placed his armor on the other volunteer. The design remained beautiful, but the frame tilted. The gold chest pulled to one side. The volunteer could barely raise both arms. Marcus knew the result before the numbers appeared. His masterpiece made him look like a king. Mine made someone else look more like himself. The vote opened. I did not watch the count. I watched Marcus. He stood in the rain wearing only the simple underlayer beneath his design. For the first time, he had no emblem, no palace, and no history wrapped around him. The result filled every screen in the city. Oraline won. Not narrowly. The public chose it by a margin so large that the number looked like an attack. The plaza erupted. Broken mirror symbols appeared across thousands of phones. The volunteer wearing my coat cried, then laughed because he was crying in front of the world. Marcus walked toward me. Grace tensed near the elevator. Brooke held the silver fabric around her shoulders. Ethan watched as if the final answer had not yet appeared. Marcus removed the gold emblem from his throat. 6 months earlier, my highest-ranked plan had ended with him offering me his throne. He placed the emblem in my hand. He said the future was mine until someone took it. It was not surrender. It was recognition. That was better. I closed his fingers around the emblem and returned it. I did not need his crown. I had taught the crowd to prefer a different shape. By sunrise, the gold emblem had become less valuable than the broken mirror. Crown Week did not end with a closing party. It ended with crowds surrounding every Orline studio in the city. People arrived wearing repaired jackets, altered uniforms, painted shoes, and homemade silver linings. They did not wait for permission from fashion experts. They had already chosen what the future looked like. The volunteer from the rooftop kept the coat. That decision was not planned. My team expected to place it in a museum. I told them museums were where useful objects went to become harmless. The coat had done what it was built to do. It belonged to the person it improved. That choice became another headline. Marcus's Hall of Legacy remained open, but the lines moved differently. Visitors still admired the history. Then they crossed the street to test what came next. Orline's revenue became so large that the cashback was no longer the main source of money. That changed everything. For the first time, I did not need to improve in order to finance the next move. I could have slowed down. Instead, I became more selective. The system had taught me a discipline wealth usually destroys. It had ignored the watch, the car, the diamond mask, and every object that asked to be admired without making me better. Now that ordinary business could fund indulgence, the system's silence became even more valuable. I bought a $200 million yacht because a new owner of a global luxury house was expected to own something unreasonable. Nothing happened. I stood on the deck, looked at the empty ocean, and felt ridiculous, so I turned the yacht into a moving survival and performance laboratory. I hired navigation experts, divers, rescue instructors, chefs, vocal coaches, and designers who understood salt, sun, and violent wind. I learned open water rescue, underwater movement, command under isolation, and how fabric behaved after days at sea. The system returned $20 billion. Then Orline held a runway beneath the surface of the ocean inside a transparent tunnel attached to the ship. Models moved through blue light while schools of fish crossed above them. I wore a coat that changed color as water pressure shifted around the glass. The clip made the rooftop entrance look modest. Grace said I had ruined the word modest permanently. She stayed beside me, but our relationship changed after Mirror Tower. She no longer waited for me to ask before challenging a decision. When a campaign used fear too aggressively, she stopped it. When a design improved my silhouette but restricted someone else's body, she rejected it. When I began scheduling 18-hour days again, she locked the training room and hid the key. I could have replaced her. That was precisely why I did not. Power becomes stupid when everyone near it is afraid of being removed. I gave Grace control of Orline's transformation standards. Any product claiming to improve posture, movement, confidence, or comfort had to survive her tests. She asked whether I trusted her that much. I told her no. I trusted the fact that she enjoyed proving me wrong more than she enjoyed pleasing me. She accepted that as affection. It was close enough. The system rewarded my growth in delegation and leadership after I spent $500 million building a global testing institute around her methods. $50 billion returned. Grace stared at the number on my phone and said she should have charged more from the beginning. I told her the first $25,000 had already made her the best investment of my life. She did not answer for several seconds. That was rare enough to feel like victory. Brooke disappeared from public view for 2 weeks after the trial. When she returned, she did not wear Marcus's gold or Orline's silver. She wore a plain dark coat with no visible mark. The change was small. But for Brooke, appearing without a clear alliance was almost an act of rebellion. She asked to meet me on the original hotel roof. I agreed because circles should be closed where they began. The stage was gone. The giant screen was dark. Without the party, the roof looked smaller than my memory. The railing where people had laughed was only metal. The balcony where Marcus had dismissed me was only stone. Brooke stood near the spot where I had left the necklace box. She said she had watched the old rejection video after Mirror Tower and did not recognize herself. I understood the feeling. She apologized without explaining what pressure, ambition, or audience had made her cruel. A clean apology is rare because most people use reasons to protect the version of themselves that caused the damage. I accepted it. Acceptance did not mean restoration. Brooke asked whether there was any version of us that could have survived. I considered the question carefully. The old Adrian had needed her approval too much. The old Brooke had needed the crowd's approval more. We had not been two people in love. We had been two insecurities feeding each other. I told her that version had already ended correctly. She looked across the city and asked what she was supposed to do now that everyone knew her as the woman who failed to recognize me. 6 months earlier, I would have enjoyed her fear. Now it seemed small. I told her to improve something no camera could confirm in one photograph: patience, skill, judgment, the ability to remain the same person when attention left the room. She asked whether Aureline could help. I said Aureline could sell her a coat. The work had to be hers. Brooke laughed quietly. It was the first laugh I had heard from her that was not aimed at anyone. Before leaving, she said she finally recognized me. I asked which version. She said the frightening one had always been there. She was right. The face had not created my hunger for control. It had only stopped the world from dismissing it. Marcus invited me to the Hall of Legacy 1 month later. This time, the building was not silent. Visitors filled every room. Some wore Aureline beneath his coats. Broken mirrors appeared beside gold emblems and photographs. The combination would have enraged him during Crown Week. Now he studied it. Marcus stood beside his first coat, restored after the trial. The missing lining remained missing. He had chosen not to hide the damage. He said I had forced his house to change faster in 1 month than it had in 10 years. I told him pressure revealed structure. He asked whether I had come to purchase the house. I had enough money. The idea held no appeal. Buying his history would make me a collector of someone else's victory. I wanted Marcus alive, proud, and improving. A defeated rival became a statue. An active rival kept the horizon moving. I offered him a different challenge. 1 collection each year, designed together, with no emblems visible until the final walk. His legacy against my measurement, forced into the same garment. Marcus called the idea offensive. Then he asked when we would begin. That was how Kings admitted interest. Our first joint coat required us to stand in the same room for 6 hours without insulting each other more than once. We failed in 20 minutes. The second attempt lasted 45. The system confirmed improvement in patience after the 7th session. The return paid for an Aureline workshop on every continent. Ethan remained the only person who did not celebrate my victory. He did not publish the 100 times theory. He did not expose the barbershop timeline or the phone vibrations. He said extraordinary claims without proof only made the claimant look desperate, and desperation was not his style. But he never stopped testing me. Sometimes a useless luxury object arrived at my office with no note. I would buy it or reject it based on strategy, never knowing whether Ethan was watching. Sometimes he attended a launch wearing a hidden flaw in his clothes to see whether I noticed. Once, he replaced every chair at a private dinner with seats that encouraged terrible posture. I corrected mine using a folded napkin and waited until dessert to tell him. He claimed it was an accident. Ethan did not believe in accidents. Neither did I. Our real confrontation came 3 months after Mirror Tower. Our line held its first global summit inside the completed flagship, a building wrapped in moving silver panels. I modeled the opening look myself. The coat began as plain black and unfolded into 7 different shapes while I walked through rooms representing each stage of my transformation. The final room contained no mirror, only the old barbershop chair. I had purchased the chair from the shop and placed it beneath a single light. Not because it was luxurious, but because sitting there reminded me of the moment progress first became visible. Ethan waited beside it after the audience left. He asked whether I had noticed the system slowing down. I had. Early improvements had been easy to measure. Better hair, better skin, better teeth, better posture. Each weakness had offered a clear destination. Now the margins were smaller. A voice could always improve, but not as dramatically. A body could become stronger, but eventually strength competed with speed. A wardrobe could become more precise, but perfection in one context failed in another. The system still returned 100 times every accepted expense. The difficult part was finding improvements genuine enough to qualify. Ethan called that my natural limit. He said the loop would weaken. My spending would rise, the gains would narrow, and eventually I would face a choice between accepting myself or inventing flaws to keep the machine alive. Grace had warned me about the same danger. I asked what Ethan wanted. He said he wanted to know whether I could live without becoming better for 1 day. I told him I slept. He said even my sleep had a performance score. That was unfair. It was also true. Ethan sat in the old barber chair and spun his coin. He said I had conquered mockery, appearance, money, fashion, Marcus, Brooke, and public doubt. But every victory had pointed in the same direction, upward. A man who could only move upward would eventually see every flat moment as falling. I understood the trap. He was not trying to expose the system anymore. He was trying to expose me to myself. So I did something he did not predict. I canceled the next day. No training, no meetings, no measurements, no launch, no cameras, no planned improvement. I walked through the city wearing an ordinary shirt and old shoes that did not squeak. I ate food because I liked it rather than because it matched a nutritional target. I sat in a park without correcting the angle of my shoulders every 30 seconds. The first hour felt wasteful. The second felt dangerous. By the fourth, I noticed how many people moved without treating themselves as unfinished projects. Some were careless, some were content, some were both. A child chased birds with no concern for efficiency. An old man slept on a bench with his mouth open and looked more peaceful than I had felt in months. I did not become enlightened. I became bored. But boredom did not kill me. That was measurable improvement. At sunset, I paid for a simple drawing lesson from a street artist. Not because drawing would increase influence or improve R-line. I wanted to make one image badly and enjoy making it. The first sketch looked like a coat being attacked by a spider. The artist laughed. I laughed too. The system remained silent. For once I did not care. Then I tried again. My observation improved. My hand relaxed. The second drawing was still terrible, but less terrible for a real reason. A small message appeared. Genuine personal improvement confirmed. The cost returned 100 times. I stared at the tiny amount and understood the answer. The system did not demand obsession. I did. That distinction gave me more control than any billion-dollar return. When I told Grace, she asked whether I had finally learned balance. I said I had learned that balance was another skill. She threw a cushion at me. I caught it without looking. She said that reaction proved I was hopeless. Perhaps. Hopeless people do not usually own the fastest-growing luxury brand on Earth. Our line expanded beyond clothing, voice programs, movement spaces, grooming tools, education retreats, performance theaters. Everything had to produce an observable benefit, or it did not carry the broken mirror. I modeled every major collection myself. Not because there were no better-looking people, but because my body was the brand's oldest argument. The before photograph remained in every flagship. I refused to retouch it. Customers stood before it, and then looked at me in campaigns hanging 50 feet high. The distance between those images sold more than beauty. It sold permission. 6 months after Crown Week, R-Line's central tower opened across from Marcus's original flagship. The building did not display my name. The outer panels reflected whoever stood before them, then shifted the reflection slightly as the person moved, revealing posture, balance, and expression. People gathered outside simply to watch themselves change. On opening night, Brooke attended without cameras following her. Marcus wore a coat from our first collaboration and complained that my sleeves were still too flexible. Grace ran the entire event while pretending she was not enjoying the chaos. Ethan arrived late. He carried a black envelope. Inside was an invitation printed on fabric so dark it seemed to absorb the room's light. There was no signature, only a location, a date, and an image of 7 empty chairs surrounding a circular mirror. The message beneath them was simple. A face can conquer attention. Can it command belief? Grace read it and said it sounded like a trap. Marcus read it and said the location had hosted gatherings of the world's most powerful cultural houses for generations. Brooke asked whether I was going. Ethan watched me instead of the invitation. He had not sent it. That made it interesting. I looked around the flagship. 6 months earlier, Brooke had looked directly at me and failed to recognize my face. Now millions recognized my silhouette from a single step. Marcus, who had once turned away, stood inside my house wearing my design. Grace, who had been hired to teach me presence, now controlled the standards of an empire. Ethan had uncovered nearly every rule of my power, and still had not found a way to make me stop using it. I had won the city, the brand, the image, and the right to define luxury on my own terms. That victory was complete. It was also local. Beyond the glass, the world was filled with older houses, sharper minds, stronger myths, and audiences who had never seen the rooftop video. They did not care that I had defeated Marcus. They did not know Brooke's name. They had their own symbols, their own kings, and their own reasons to dismiss me. For most people, that would have been enough uncertainty to stay home. For me, it was a list of improvements waiting to become money. I placed the black invitation inside the frame beside Ethan's barbershop note. The first note had asked what a haircut bought me. The answer stood all around us. A face, a fortune, a brand, a kingdom built from every weakness I had refused to keep. I turned toward the moving walls as my reflection multiplied across the flagship. In one panel, I saw the awkward man in the rain. In another, the figure from the rooftop bridge. In another, the designer climbing Mirror Tower through a storm. None of them had disappeared. They had become layers. Brooke once believed standing beside me lowered her value. Marcus once believed attention belonged to history. Ethan once believed the secret of my wealth would explain the secret of my power. They had all been wrong in different ways. The money was never the power. The power was that I could look at any weakness, spend whatever it took to destroy it, and receive enough strength to challenge something larger. There would always be something larger. I smiled at the 7 empty chairs. I had conquered the mirror. Next, I would conquer the people deciding what it was allowed to reflect.